Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. As you know, this is a show about astrology. Astrology is one of my favorite topics of all time because I think there's great richness in the language of astrology. I think there's great foreboding in the astrology. There's great futurism in the astrology. It's a very rich language that is rich as any can be. And I have one of the world's foremost astrologers on the show today. Great honor to have Erin Sullivan on. She'll be on in a minute or two. I just want to remind you about my newsletter, which goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, you'll find a couple of paragraphs of the mundane astrology, which affects all of us on the planet. And then I break it out into the individual signs. From there, you'll find links to the podcast, links to my videos, and all that stuff is there as well at chrisflisher.com or turningofthewheel.com. But what I want to know about astrology more than anything else is the fact that how rich it is, especially when you speak with people who have understood astrology for years and years and years. Their wisdom is deeper than a lot of the wisdom we may find on the web these days. And so it's a great honor to have someone such as Erin on because her history goes back. She was born to be an astrologer. She's an astrologer's astrologer. Her website is erinsullivan.com. She's written a number of fantastic books, which actually hold up incredibly well over time because they really do state what a retrograde is, what Saturn in transit is. She understands this language fully, and because we're coming up to an interesting time where we're going to see Saturn and Pluto together in a conjunction for the first time since hundreds of years, it's going to be interesting to get her take on. So Erin, welcome to Turning the Wheel today. It's such a great honor to have you back on. It's been a long time.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it has. It's been since the last big solar eclipse.
That's right. Yeah, the Great American Eclipse, which was quite profound in itself. If you think about it, going back to that time, I mean, symbolically and literally, we saw the sun cut the United States right in half.
I know. And it just happened again with the lunar eclipse.
Right. Exactly.
We saw it from here in the southwest, in New Mexico. But yeah, this the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is really a significant movement.
It is, especially when we take those two planets. We see both of those planets as sort of being malefic planets, and when they combine forces, and then there's going to be a period of time when Jupiter's involved, the whole thing seems like an inflamed sort of reset of the universe, as well as all big political parties and bodies and societies as well. So I'm curious, we don't want to sound like the end of the world is coming because we've had these before, but there is a sense of increasing nervousness about it in the community and in the world.
There is. And people, like I just talked to a 20-year-old girl who had just entered university, and she was talking about this free-floating anxiety, and I thought, because she's so sensitive, who she is, she's picking up the collective anxiety because a girl at 20 in first-year university who's had no horrible experiences in her life, is suffering from global anxiety. Mm-hmm. And, these Saturn-Pluto conjunctions are very strong, and they have, that we have a history, like just the most recent is the Pluto and Saturn were in their new phase conjunct October 5th, 1914 at 2 Cancer. And then again in August 11th and 1947 at 13 Leo, and November 8th, 1982 at 27 Leo. So look back, because I've got Saturn Pluto in my 9th house. I was born with post-war. So 1914 was the beginning of World War I. Yeah. 1947 was the baby boom and the great, incredible growth of economics and ideas and positive, action.
Post-World War II, yeah. Post-World War II boom, yeah.
1947 people were revolutionaries, Saturn, Pluto. in the 1960s, fighting the Vietnam War. And so there was a lot of dynamic, positive action taking place, as well as the typical, difficulties in a lot of countries in the world.
But they seem those are, even though those are huge events, and if we try to measure them in today's context, and we see where we're going with the government, where we see where we're going with the environment, it seems like the poop is going to hit the ventilator somewhere in there, and it may very well be the big enemy, or the big outcome of all this may be the environment or the reordering of the whole world order, it looks like.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I had forgotten about that. I remembered it a couple of minutes ago, but that Hades is a place, right? And Pluto is the god of that place. And he's also, therefore, the god who is the conservator of all of Gaia's wealth. And in that, we're finding ourselves in a position where Gaia's wealth is beginning to erode, disappear, sidewind, become pollutant. And Pluto-Saturn has to do with the environmental crisis that we are facing, and will have to be corrected. Because with every dramatic period that I mentioned here with Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, and then there was oppositions too, there has been a correction of extreme and very dangerous possibility. Yeah?
Yeah, I see that.
So when you think in terms of the oppositions of Saturn and Pluto, February of 1931, at 19 Capricorn Cancer, same position where it is now, where it's going to be at 22 degrees of Capricorn Cancer, and also conjunct their respective south node and north nodes. So 1931 was the big depression, but followed by a tremendous humanitarian relationship amongst countries, and it was very different. And then in 65, which was the middle of the 60s, it was at 14 to 17 Pisces Virgo, youth and global revolution. They were the result of the first conjunction in 1947. Yeah, so 1966 was when we really took this to the streets in faith as opposed to anger.
Right.
The protesters and my involvement in the 60s, which was very, very active, but, with entertainment and music and helping guys get out of the Vietnam War, trying to work with the times. It was a very positive period of time. So there seems to be a very important, reversal that takes place.
Yeah, I think that's true. One thing I see from that is that I grew up in that era too. I'm a little bit younger than you, but not much. And I remember that period looking back as being a time of enormous potential. I thought we really nailed it for some reason. I thought we had arrived at the doorstep of what utopia was supposed to be. I was so optimistic, and perhaps naively so, but still, I thought that was great. And then when we veered off track for quite some time, 30, 40 years, we veered off track. And I wonder if perhaps this might not be a return to unfinished business in some way. I mean, in many ways, over the last several years, we saw we saw everything came to fruition as a result. We saw the first Black American, African American president. We saw, feminism and the first, feminist person run for office, not successfully, but those are big themes that drew out of that. And I'm wondering if there's not a longer extension of that theme that pervades into this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, sort of a righting of the wrong, which we see. I think
that's very important thing to notice, and it's actually true, because all the dreams of the 60s, the 1960s, we always forget that there's another half of the generation. So the other half sort of ate all the money, drank all the oil, and became plutocrats. Right. Yeah. There's exactly. A word that. There you go. Let's get all the stuff and the money. Yeah. And it's up to almost to a ludicrous situation that the United States is in right now, as far as an example of a civilized country. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous. But with this Saturn-Pluto conjunction in this cycle, this year, 2020, I should say, at 22 Cancer Capricorn conjunct each of their nodes. So we have that, which existed when the United States natal horoscope was created in 1776. I think we are looking at, a huge correction, which isn't going to be that comfortable for those of us who did not find ourselves in a resourceful occupation or focused on money, but we focused mostly on time and love and energy and alternative ways of thinking. Because I was born in 47, you were born close to that, so we were idealists, and some of us, I like to say, one half just lived in a dream world and operated on faith that it's going to work out, and as long as I just live out my positive karma. But the other half is just determined to take it down.
When I think back, and you're raising some interesting points that I find to be, because I was born in 52, so I have, I'm in the same. I'm in the same ballpark. Yeah, and I think that if I were to try to look at this through the eyes of a positive person, which I tend to think of myself as, I would say that the Neptune quality here is what might be our saving grace, only because of the fact that I think it would speak to a rise in a sort of a spiritual collective, as well as perhaps a more of a tribal energy, which we also saw back in the 60s. I lived in a commune.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And so why wouldn't we return to that sort of thing where we get our friends from college, we gather, we buy a big hunk of land together, and we all go live on that together until we fade away? I mean, we really do have to look at ourselves as our tribe, as our safety net. I think that's what we'll have to look at.
I think that this is so synchronous, because just the other day, when I was talking about my own personal situation and how difficult it was, to exist in a world in which where I live my beliefs and I teach my beliefs and I counsel people, I help them through things, and somebody says, well, why don't you just move back to the old hog farm? I said, oh my God. I mean, that's very retrogressive, but at the same time I thought, well, what an interesting idea, because it's a huge 50-year-old, founders of Seva and, very humanitarian group. And I thought, well, maybe I should.
I mean, it's not the worst of it. I mean, we're stronger together. We all know that. And so we don't want to be diffused and trying to be, I think in many ways the web, for all the benefit it has brought to us, it has also divided us in some ways because we've become so insulated. We don't, I'm speaking in broad terms here, so don't get me wrong. But I think that because so many of us spend time on Facebook or in these little sort of enclaves of isolation, we're not getting out and making the connections that we need to make on a face-to-face, person-to-person kind of value. I mean, we spend more time texting than we do actually talking, even if it's just, simple things. It's sometimes easier to avoid the conversation. But I think in that, the inverse of that is actually the solution to it all, which is to get back out, put your phone away, meet face-to-face, find out how they can help you, how you can help them, and join hands in sort of a revival of what you and I grew up with in the 60s. I think that would be, and that might very well be what Chiron is all about, sort of this return to Chiron, the 50-year cycle. That could very well be a way for us all to collectively heal the wounds of the past 50 years.
It's really, really interesting, because I think that what you're saying is absolutely correct. The alienation and the loss of tribalism has been a subject of philosophers and great thinkers like Mircea Eliade, all sorts of people who have written about this, 60 to 100 years ago,
right,
about alienation from the tribal collective and the lack of the family dialogue. And in doing so, we become increasingly isolated without a tribe.
Right.
And that is in itself dangerous. And so that's where I would encourage clients and people that I talk to or speak to about their own charts to try and find ways of actually, not feeling alienated. Like the 20-year-old I mentioned, right, who's suffering from, anxiety. I said, I think part of the anxiety will be minimized when you get into second year and you start to feel more comfortable with the tribe.
Right.
Because that's what you need.
But, the thing is that none of us can exist on ourselves. I mean, some of us have the ability to survive on our own free, talents or whatever. But I think overall, the majority of us want to connect. We want to be part of a community. This is what drove conventional religion, which is what drove all the great, social organizations. It is about mutual support, and I think that we are, it just to me it seems so damn simple to be. And I know this very well. I lived it as in a commune. If I didn't have rice and beans at night, somebody else had rice and beans for me, or whatever. I'm saying. I'm simplifying it, but it really is a question of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And it's a mutually beneficial conversation and support system that allows us to thrive in our later years. This is where we have to turn. I think this is very logical, and I'm not opposed to it. I think that people need their privacy. They need their quiet time alone. But by the same token, we need each other. We are human beings. We are social beings, and we need to be social, I think.
I think tribalism in the 21st century is, really needs to be revived and brought back. And,
there's your next book.
Well, yes. In fact, I have an article on it. Maybe I should expand it. It's been a while since I've written a book. I need a sponsor.
Well, we'll get you one. I know plenty of publishers, and I know plenty of people who can get you one. And you've got the name to back it up, so we could easily do that.
All my books and stuff. Yeah, so this business of tribalism, Chris, is so important right now to us. And I found myself becoming increasingly more isolated, and because A, there's a tendency for me to do that, but B, it's the circumstances in which I'm experiencing the world.
Of course, yeah. I'm the same boat. I'm isolated not through choice, but by necessity or by virtue of what I don't have, is what it comes down to. If I had money, if I had fame and fortune to go out and spend, I could be more social and more present in the world. But because of the fact that we are living in this sort of strange space with this strange sort of occupation that we have, we become less and less available. We can change that. I think that if people, especially the younger generation, if they reach out to someone such as yourself or myself, and they tap into your wisdom and your knowledge base, they will find that the road for them is much easier because they'll understand the language, they'll understand the landscape in which they're entering. So it's vital for them to get a reading at least once a year, if not more, every 6 months even, because the transits do change your life, especially for the younger generation coming up. The ones that are born in the 1990s have this, they have this Pluto-Neptune conjunction. They are going to be faced with all sorts of illusions, I think, in some ways about what reality is, and it may not be they may be coming up to a really significant dose of what reality is, and they could use the advice of what we can offer them.
I think Pluto has a lot to do with perspective as well, doesn't it? And that how we have our perspective, because of course Saturn was at once the boundary of the solar system, right, the Reaper. And now we've got Pluto, who is the boundary of the known solar system and the ruler of the underworld. And so when you think in terms of Saturn and Pluto cooperating, in other words, operating together, we're looking at, let's start to look at what we are limited in and how we might be able to delimit that, and how we might be able to add to or support and to feel that we're getting some compensation, because, we can't do something for nothing. It's natural, it's human to have reciprocity. And I think that that's what's collapsing right now, is this concept of reciprocity.
I think you're right, yeah.
Collaboration, which literally means laboring together. Yeah?
Many hands make light work. I mean, it's so much easier to do it with more people involved. And it's a critical piece. And this, I think what we're feeling is the sort of the applying pressure of this transit, which is where we always feel the pressure. It's always as it applies. Once it hits, it begins to diffuse afterwards. But leading up to it, in many ways, it might be a sort of a symbolic drive to force us to be more collective, to force us to be more social, to put away our false domains of, internet living, and to return to Earth. And we may be returning to Earth by means over which we have no control. I mean, in other words, something natural could happen, or some sort of thing could happen that forces us to be more deficient more dependent upon our own natural resources. Who knows if something happens and they shut the power system off and we have to go live off the backyard or whatever. I mean, I'm not trying to be dire or
No,
scary, but I think this is a
people
good.
read the news. They know what's going on. People are floating in boats all over the world trying to get in. People are stuck down on the Mexican border trying to get in. New Mexico, where I'm living, the governor pulled all the uh, um, the
National Guard. I saw that. I saw that. Yeah.
he pulled them. It's just like forget it because you know if I go up to the liquor store and buy a bottle of wine, it's going to be from my Hispanic friend, and he's going to have 25 family members somewhere out there undocumented, in the family. And and so the day that Donald Trump was elected, I went in to get myself a bottle of wine.
Should have gotten two.
I said, I bet you've had a great rush on Scotch whiskey lately. And he said, oh, yeah. And it was funny because I looked at him and we looked at each other and it was sort of like, I understand what you're going through and blah, blah, blah. And I said, it's really effed up. And this guy behind me just laughed because it's like nobody's actually said that out loud in his store before.
Right. It's funny.
It's true. And so we all felt a communal, between us, the Hispanic and then this black guy. It was weird because and then me, the white girl. And we're sort of laughing.
In perfect harmony.
Absolutely, as it should be.
As it is, and as it is in most cases, I think, and that's what's most scary because we are removed from this society, because we're not out there in the streets like we used to be. We're getting a message that's been shifted and sculpted to bring about division, and that division is what perhaps that's the wall we have to hit in order to get to the next stage. And maybe this is all part of the master plan. The pendulum's got to swing so far, hit the wall, and then it swings back, and that may be the point.
You should talk about division, which means boundaries.
Right.
As well. And Pluto is about breaking boundaries. It's about, being of both the underworld and the above world because of the brotherhood of the sky gods and Pluto. And Demeter, who's deeply involved in the whole Plutonian experience as well, who is the goddess of the earth, the mother.
Right.
And Saturn is the boundary. And so when we're running Saturn and Pluto together, especially on their nodal axes, there are schools of thought where the nodal axes connections have to do with karma. And that the collective karma comes up and hits you right in the face when you get a major, because for instance, it's a 24,000 year cycle of Pluto and its nodes. And that's the whole entire great year of the 12 signs
right.
of the epoch. Yeah. And when I read that, I just went, oh my God, why is everything so connected? Only through astrology, and this is really true, have I survived some of the most unbelievable difficulties in my life because I understand the big picture. That doesn't mean I don't have anxiety or that I'm not worried or I have to make changes, but it does mean that I can not only help myself by saying, okay, at least I can understand this, but I can also help other people.
Well, it empowers you in a way with the language to explain what's happening, and through the explanation you come to accept. And when you accept, then you're giving in, and you're going with the stream as opposed to going against the stream. That's the beauty of it.
Well, the beauty of astrology is you can actually talk about everything without mentioning the planet name, and you're actually discussing, the metalog.
Exactly. That's why when I talk about this, and we happen to mention Trump's name or whatever, I want people to know that I'm not going to make any political statement whatsoever. But when we talk about astrology and the times in which we live, and we see the characters on the stage that we see, it all makes sense. It's not as if this is some sort of aberration. This is actually manifest destiny in some ways, and this has to happen in some ways. It seems like.
Yeah. No, that's what sort of 1931 was all about.
Right.
Wasn't it? And and that we go through these political phases. That's what people do. That's what tribalism is. So, we can say, well, my tribe is better than your tribe. Well, that doesn't, not very, helpful. But we do have to recognize which tribe we are actually in. And
I think breaking down the barriers between the tribes is important so that you become more tribal on a greater level. There's always going to be division. You're always going to have people who are different than you, and that's what makes the world go round. But I also think, and there's that sort of polarity there, the pluses and the minuses and all the going around. And it is binary in that regard. But I think also that the fact that people allow themselves to become boxed in is where a lot of the shakeup has to happen. Sort of the environmental discussion that we had talked about, sort of this crumbling of the earth, is indicative of the same thing with the society. So I do think this is a moment. Well, I'd like to think, this is how I'd like to think, that we're hitting rock bottom and that this is as bad as it's going to get. But I think it's going to get a little bit worse in the near future, in the next couple of years, before we come out of that trench.
Well, I think it will economically and in every way that has to do with the support system of people, of humans, and borders and so on will be breaking down like mad, which is happening now.
Yeah.
And there will be new, renewal of faith and commitment and relationships and so on collectively and, internationally. But I do think that, we're coming into a period of time in which we need to be very conscious that this is part of a massive cycle that has been going on since the beginning of time. And, ever since, the ancients were looking at the sky for, answers, we still do that. And the answer that seems to be coming from this massive collective question, what the age is going on, what's going on is yes, there is a breakdown for a breakthrough. And this is very often the case. The human psyche will sometimes collapse in on itself and then, go into a space of confusion, exhaustion, tiredness, and then re-emerge with some new ideas. Many great thinkers have had breakdowns, months of depression. I mean, it happens in the human system, and this is what the Saturn and Pluto for individuals could bring.
Right, it's 40 days and 40 nights in the desert.
There you go.
Yeah.
It really is. Mm-hmm. I mean, 40 days and 40 nights is the exact Venus retrograde cycle.
I know. And it's so important to know that, because I think that we see these cycles, and this is where I always say to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So we do know that this is happening. We do know it's coming, so we can't swim against this tide. We have to find a way to blend in with the river, so we go with the river and come out of it as best we can.
Yeah,
not in a way that's harmful, and I think that now we're going to have Uranus in Taurus as well. That's going to bring up a lot of surprises with regard to the Earth, I think, with regard to finance and big corporations. I think big corporations may either rule the country or they may be the opposite of what rules the country. Maybe we turn totally against that. I don't know. Good question.
Well, last time that Uranus was in Taurus I was looking at the numbers. It was 1934.
34, and that's when the Depression really hit. I mean, but that was also a time when we had the New Deal. Didn't we have the New Deal then?
Yeah, it was. Yes, that's when he started building cool houses and stuff like that.
And the New Deal was also, about Social Security. It was about, and those are all things that Roosevelt brought about. And now we have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about the Green New Deal, and a lot of other Democrats talking about the Green New Deal. So it's almost like this is a cyclical nature, and the fact that they throw the word green in there means that it is the environment.
Well, and it's very interesting that there's such a great presence of women now in the executive places in the world. Yeah, I mean,
I think that is definitely as it's going to be and should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's. You and I, of course, would find that sort of, well, what's so big deal about that? It should have been like that always, but it hasn't been. But it's going to change. There's going to be more equality, because look at the gender bending and the shifting of morphing of people's bodies.
Right.
My neighbor, when she moved in, we shook hands. She says, "My name is X, and if you need any help, I'm here." And so I said, "Great." So we shook hands, and I thought. And the handshake was like a man. And I went, "Great, you can carry my groceries." And she laughed. It was amazing.
That's funny.
So who knows?
We are headed towards a matriarchal society. I think that's part of the great pendulum, and I'm looking forward to it. I think that we're seeing that. And I think, Nancy Pelosi said it best. She said, as a mother of 5 children and 9 grandchildren, I know a temper tantrum when I see one. That is really the great Earth Mother speaking when she speaks of dealing with immature men, or men who are short-sighted and filled with ego.
It's interesting because the age of Cancer, of the great ages of the turn of the polar wheel, the age of Cancer brought the woman into high position. And apparently, according to a book on a great author I read, that it was the mathematical height of feminine. But it was also a time when women created like bowls to save things in, and corralled their children, and they were educated. The men were busy going trailblazing, and they'd come back. But it was the women who actually civilized.
They were the nest.
Yes, the age of Cancer, which is a 2,500-year period. Mm-hmm. And we're coming to the end of the age of Pisces. And so we're going into Aquarius, and so something's got to give.
Well, it'll be the grand collective. That's what it'll be. I believe that's true. Yeah.
We're
talking today with the one and only Erin Sullivan. Her website is erinsullivan.com. It's ErinSullivan.com. I encourage you to go there. She teaches classes. She's got a number of fantastic books up there. She's a wellspring of knowledge. And if you millennials who are out there listening, and I say that with great respect, I encourage you to reach out to this wise elder because she has the value and the truth and the information that can greatly help you. You can contact her at erinsullivan.com. She's also on Facebook as well. We'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back in a few minutes to continue our discussion. But I do encourage you to go to her website, erinsullivan.com. Great information there. Sign up for her mailing lists. Get yourself a reading with this woman if you can. It's really going to be helpful. So we'll be back in a few minutes, so hang in there.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today, or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is the one and only Erin Sullivan. erinsullivan.com is her website, ErinSullivan.com. I encourage you to go there. She's written the definitive book on Saturn, I believe. I think that's the book I always turn to when I get into my Saturnian moods every 7 years or so. And it's a fantastic tome of information, as well as her book on retrograde planets. And she's got a number of other books as well. Her work is highly regarded in the world of astrology, and her wisdom is deep and profound. And I encourage you to reach out to her and spend some time with her, getting a personal reading from her, because I think it'll help soothe your battered soul in these times that are so stormy. We're talking today about a number of interesting topics. We're kind of meandering, but that's the way astrology is. It's a nice meandering conversation, but it gives us a chance to sort of ruminate about where we are, how we got here, and why we're here, and how long it's going to last. And those are all, I think you can find great comfort in that as well. I mean, it does look like a very fractious time. No one's going to deny that. We are living in a very troubled, fractious time. No one will deny that. But we also know that time is going to come to an end and that we will emerge stronger, better at the other end. And I think that's the great takeaway. Don't you think that we will emerge out this ultimately better?
I think because I was born in November of 47, so I have a Saturn Pluto with Mars conjunction. So I was born under the Saturn Pluto conjunction, and I've morphed in many times in my life. I've actually gone through some of the most terrifying things. I've always been attracted to countries that, where I will arrive in Lima, Peru, in September the 2nd of 1972, and wake up in the morning and there's tanks in the street and Allende had shot himself. And I'm going, oh, great. Here I am again.
Here I am once again.
The Middle East, and just as they're going to start to invade Yemen, which is the most beautiful country I've ever seen.
Really? Wow.
It's just smashed now. But I mean, so Saturn Pluto people do tend to gravitate to this whiff of danger. They kind of like the dark because it's very interesting, and it's a place where people don't necessarily want to go. But, if you're a deep person, even if you don't have a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, you will go into those dark places in order to be able to understand the human condition, and in all of its realms, from the heights to the sadness, to the loneliness, to the isolation, and to the joy that comes from collaboration, working with people, talking to others. And that business of the internet that you mentioned was very significant. I feel that myself, that it has been an incredible gift. I mean, I really love it because I can keep in touch with my grandkids at college and so on. But it has also created a competitive level in communications where there's no real recourse. In other words, you can say things, but nobody can really argue with you. And so it's like you say something maybe that's, a bit off the wall, you get away with it. And so there's no feedback. There's no real feedback.
No, listen, and there's no consequence either for what you say. There's no consequence attached either. So you can get away with saying anything you want to say, and that's where the idea of fake news comes from. That's where these conspiracy theories spring from. It's insane. I always use the analogy of the old days when we were growing up and driving across country. We'd see billboards every couple miles or whatever, or every 110, 15 miles, we'd see a billboard, right? And now we're in the age of the internet. There's a billboard every inch. And every inch is a person's face up there saying, I'm best, I'm best, I'm best, I'm best, I'm best, or I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And we are saturated to the point where we can't even see any billboards anymore.
Those billboards were fabulous. I mean, I remember the Burma shade sides of the road when my dad and I would be driving down to Mexico to Baja from L.A., and there would be Burma shade, all. I mean, we have these really weird memories, and they're also old-fashioned, and so I'm hoping that this particular negative side of what we've been talking about will become out of date. Yeah, that it too will have its time.
Oh, I think so. It's a very Uranus and Aries kind of invention.
Well, it is, and so with Uranus going into Taurus, people need to really protect their resources. And
I think it's sort of run its course. I mean, even if you go on Facebook today, I only know from my own experience, but I see far more ads on there and things that I never even thought of seeing before than I do of personal friends or posts. All my feeds are taken up. That may be just the way I run it. I don't spend much time up there because it sort of drives me crazy. But I think it's going to be passé. I think you're right. And that may be something that we sort of walk away from as Uranus enters into Taurus and we force ourselves to become more groundbreaking. There was a certain newness to the internet and to Facebook and Twitter and all the very certain newness. We had to be hip. We had to be on it. Those of us who were older had to adapt to make our lives so we understood what was going on, where my sons can just zip through there no problem. Yeah. And I'm sure your kids and your grandchildren can do the same. But for us, it wasn't as easy. And perhaps they will reach a point where they'll grow tired of it. I mean, it's going to be too much stimuli for anybody.
Well, it is. And it's also alienating in the sense that you're not really getting any personal touch.
None whatsoever.
There's no feedback. I mean, I keep mine limited, and so I and when I get likes on a comment or something that I'll post, I feel good.
Of course.
Yeah, mm-hmm. It makes you feel good, like, oh, they liked it, or somebody will make a jokey comment or something, and it's like, oh, goody, I got feedback. But I do keep my internet activity very limited, and my Facebook is, it's open to have friends on my professional page, but not my private page.
Right, and that's wise. That's the right way to do it. I think that's the right way to do it. You really want to keep it separate. I mean, it is a marketing tool, and we've all in this world of becoming self-marketers, which none of us really had thought of before. It was always about there's always a degree of self-promotion in anything that you're doing, but not to the degree that it is now, not to the competitive degree that it is now.
I know. I think that, that's because there's so many of us on the planet that there's almost like a scrabbling to exist and stay alive. And in however that can take, whatever shape that will take, is to prove that you exist.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. My son, my youngest son, is a jazz musician. He's a piano player, and he's having a terrible time in the digital world because it's one thing to create the music and play it. It's another thing to get it promoted. That's where things become very difficult. He makes very little money trying to promote his own product, and it's frustrating to him, and he can't survive as a musician, and that doesn't surprise me. But, 30, 40 years ago, he probably would have had a record label and a company behind him to promote him, and it would have been much different. There would have been radio stations. All that's disappeared. It's all gone digital.
It has. It has.
And I don't want to sound like an old man, but that is a reality. I mean, we're just talking about reality.
Yeah, well, it's a reality that's part of the shifting of the times. And, everybody, does talk about the old days, and that's what we do. But the fact is that we have to think back to see further into the future. It is what was going on in our history that has brought us to where we are now. And with, our, close in age, our generation, I think it's very important for us to stand as elders in the community and hope that the younger people will stop fighting, and that.
Right. I think we're here in some ways to remind them of what can be and what was, what once was and what can be again. And that's why I love the idea of the tribe. I think that I think Uranus, I think Neptune in Pisces particularly speaks to this because it does sort of strike to that sort of collective subconscious quality component there that allows people to become more spiritual and more cerebral, perhaps, and less bound to the more mundane qualities, which I would hope would be a way of gathering more momentum through the use of tribal living. I think we're going to find ourselves with no choice. I mean, where I live, they have these communities called cooperative communities, and they're not based on age. It's not like an over 55 thing or something like that. It's not assisted living. It's not senior living. But it's just people who buy a hunk of land, put 6 houses on it, and they share the property taxes, and they share sort of a certain sense of resource. And in that sense of sharing, the load is much lighter. It's just so damn logical.
Well, it's the conversation. It's having the conversation that's so important. And when you're not having the conversation or a conversation, and then you're alone. And so if you can't, do cooperative conversing or metalogging or, however it is that we can reconnect on a tribal level, mind you, the internet has helped with that because people are, like I teach at Kepler College and, and my courses are online, but it isn't, it's without the personal contact. You're not getting the touch.
Right. It's the same reason I never liked taking online courses, to be honest, because I really want to be there to raise my hand and have the teacher say, "What's your question?" It's sort of what you want to have. But when we look at where we are today and where we're headed, I would say that going into the 2020 cycle, which looks like it's going to be a complete remake of everything, it's a gigantic reset. I think the fact that the Jupiter's there, sort of. I'm thinking in my wildest, most optimistic viewpoint, the idea of them being together at that point in time, the Jupiter would bring to it a sense of rapid and large expansion of a spirituality, and Saturn makes us do the right thing, and Pluto says whatever was there in the past, this corruption, this lying, this deceit, would be the way that gets wiped out, because that's always been hidden.
I'm glad you brought that up because it made me turn to my ephemeris, which I still use.
So do I.
Into a shred. And you're right. It's going to be a Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction, with a waxing trine from Uranus and Neptune in Pisces. This is September, October of 2020.
Right. I think Mars goes through there at right around that same time, I think, as well, which might be the trigger.
Yeah. Yeah, because Mars goes into Taurus in 2021. Oh boy, I think that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, you see, it's actually morphing into the air.
It is, yeah.
Because it makes grand trines in each of the Earth elements.
And so after we have this Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto conjunction, then Saturn and Jupiter move on into Aquarius together in 2021, 2022, something like that.
May 2021.
Yeah, 21. Then we might see the manifestation of what we've just been talking about, because this is the collective sign. This is Jupiter in the collective sign. And with Saturn there, it's like, okay, we are forced to be tribal in some ways, or this is the only way to be forward thinking.
I think that's, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm just looking at January 2021 when Jupiter's at 2 and Saturn at 2 degrees of Aquarius. And so this whole sort of business of the age of Aquarius, I don't know that it's going to happen overnight, but I think that this is right, that the humanitarian level, but we have to remember the detachment of Aquarius.
I know. But that serves well, I think, because it is more of a group emphasis.
Yeah, because the split of Gaia from Uranus, the primordial divorce, was basically Kronos castrating the heavens from the earth. And so there is that sense of being distanced, but what it also offers, because of that opportunity for distance, is perspective.
Yeah, that's why I like it. And I think it's okay in some ways. I think that Saturn is comfortable in Aquarius, and I think that and Jupiter is also I think a good placement. And I think that the idea that this would bring us to a place where we have no other choice but to be in that position is sort of, I know what you're saying. There is a certain detachment to it. There is a certain chilliness to it, but I'm not sure that's bad.
I mean, if it's about changing laws, and working on new legal proposals, you have to have a very clear and very concise and very cool mind.
You do. You've got to be detached. You've got to be pragmatic.
Yeah, it's a system. You've got to, because if you're all emotional, because we used to have meetings with our group all the time, every week we'd have these meetings and discussions, and there has to be, a sense of individuality, Uranus,
right,
and uniqueness in the collective, so that we each speak to a particular theme, and that's what may be coming out of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2021.
And that also speaks to the idea of the tribe as well, because if you've got a plumber, an electrician, and a carpenter, and an astrologer, and a chef, and a veterinarian, and a dentist, and a doctor, all in the same tribe, and the list goes on and on and on. We all have our it's like the old medieval village where everybody has their specialty that they all turn to, and you bring in that specialty, and that's your contribution to the society.
That's exactly right. And I think we all have, on some very significant level, something to contribute.
Of course we do. That's exactly right. I think we're going about it the wrong way. I think Facebook is the wrong way to contribute. I think we need to contribute in a community level.
My 20-year-old client the other day, the alienation and anxiety and I'm I'm feeling inferior. I said, it will pass. It's when you feel that you have finally, kind of earned your place, and you move in, and you by second year
Gain some confidence, yeah.
exactly, you'll be able to make maybe a change in a course. You'll meet some more people. You begin your tribe. And so, she understood that. You see, these kids understand what I'm talking about.
Right. It's growing pains. It's growing pains.
No, even though they don't, they really have the consciousness of where we're coming from the 60s.
And they do. They actually have that because it's part of their DNA. If you think about it, it's all interwoven. But I think that the world that they're in now is they are being fragmented and attacked by this the digital media. And I sound like I rant on this a lot, and I don't mean to. I appreciate digital media as much as anybody else, but it has interjected a whole level of confusion and anxiety to these younger kids that never had before. I mean, the fact that children are sitting in school cafeterias across the table from each other and texting about what the girl next to them is wearing or whatever, or however minute you want it to be, is a symbol of a huge detachment. And that's what's got to end, I think.
Yeah, and it does come, it comes like, I really see that the younger kids, the kids that are sort of 16 to 30, 25, they have the consciousness. I mean, before my granddaughter went off to university in Portland, she's an artist and a really good one, and she's met her tribe. I mean, Portland is now her home. She's met her tribe, and although her mom and dad live here and I live here and other relatives, her relationships have really developed, and these kids have all the consciousness that we brought to them. And then they will have more as they get older and we die. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's like they get it. And before she went off to university, we lay on her bed and I looked at her horoscope and looked at her chart and talked to her about it. And she was, it was as if she, and then she wanted to, I gave her my copy of Linda Goodman's Sun Signs.
Oh, good.
And then so I gave her love signs as well. And she thought, just all her friends want her to read about it to them.
They're very, very curious.
Isn't it cute? It's just beautiful to see.
I actually think it's perfect timing because it really does add more validity to astrology on a greater level because it just shows how intriguing it is. And I think people are becoming more and more familiar with the language, which is good for us overall, but we can, I think it's really, really helpful. I love that. My son, who's 27, is going through this right now. He's a Capricorn, so he's got Saturn and Pluto right on his sun right now, and he's definitely growing up, as I would say. He's the jazz musician I spoke of. Right. He's very well. He's always asked me about astrology. He's absorbed it to the point where he actually looks at it and understands it. And I spent hours teaching him, and he's really loves it. He's totally drawn to it.
Huh. Well, I think that the thing is that what you're saying is he's been invested with some background information that has gone both in unconsciously as well as visually and verbally. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think all of our children, all of our offspring, and you and I as well are products of our parents. So we bring that strain of DNA through, and that the DNA strain I think is something that we're I always think of it like coming into the world as being preloaded, like you'd buy a computer with the software system already on there, right?
Yep, the ancestral.
So that's why I've got 3 grandchildren now that are all Aquarians.
Oh, fascinating!
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean,
3 are they only have these aspects that are similar,
and they're all about 6 months apart. I mean, they're obviously different people, but they're all, and they have this very strong Aquarian trait to them, and I find that to be fascinating. As if they are, they're heralding the era in, and they will grow up into this era. Because I can see my grandson at 6, 8 months or a year old, understanding immediately already how to use a phone. He already knows how to swipe. He knows how to make the pictures bigger, how to make them smaller. He knows how to play videos.
That's weird, isn't it?
It's very weird. Now that's sort of what I call preloaded information. That's something they came in with.
That's exactly right. And that's why we have to have faith in them, because they are the ones who will carry forth the new word. After we're gone, they have already, a background and a future to create.
They carry the mantle. Yeah, they do. And I think the age of Aquarius, I mean, you're right about it. It is sort of there's a certain sense of detachment to it, a sense of, what's the word? I always use the word chilly, but I don't think that's quite apropos enough.
I think it's more split off so that they can observe from on high. In other words,
right. Analytical, maybe more analytical.
Excuse me, and a sense of analysis and resolution, because Aquarius is, in the astrology, of course, the 11th house of tribalism.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, so you're seeking your tribe from the 11th house, and so that could be a global tribe. Yeah?
Right, and so I think in that message and in that foreshadowing of what's to come, we can take great heart and be encouraged and actually look at the future optimistically, despite the swamp that we're in, no pun intended, that we can see that the end of the swamp is that the land will dry and we'll be able to emerge from the swamp. I do think that we are in a swamp, and the swamp is very difficult. It's like swimming with shoes on. I always call a Saturn transit, like a Saturn return, like swimming with shoes on. You can swim, you can keep yourself afloat. It's just a lot harder. And so we go through this time. Yeah, do you like that?
Because I'm thinking of how we're supposed to have originated by something creeping up out of the sea onto the sand.
Right.
And maybe we need to go back to the sea.
Go back to the sea and swim with our shoes on, so we see how hard it is, and then we take our shoes off and we can swim much easier. Or I use the same analogy of carrying bricks around in a backpack all day long. That's kind of what a Saturn transit is. You got to wear and then you take it off and you get the reward of having stronger bodies and stuff like that. Those are just simple metaphors that I like to play with. But I do think that the generation can see this as a time of great opportunity, because out of any crisis comes the great creativity. I think we'll see a burst of creativity, perhaps even matched by what we saw back in the 60s.
I think so, and I think what we've seen, with the invention of the internet and all of that. I think that the technology is going to become increasingly more sophisticated, obviously. And also, it may well be part of this new form of tribalism. In other words, encouraging people to operate together as opposed to operate separately in this tiny little house in your little computer all by yourself.
I think you're right. I like that idea. I could see that, because there are some programs that do connect people together. There are sort of private conversations that you have. Slack is one, for example, where people set up groups and they communicate within those groups. And so there is a sort of a virtual tribalism about it, but at least the message is getting out.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend who belongs to an astrology talk. And he loves it, because he's met people and they argue about this and that. And
right.
And that,
but I mean, when you and I first spoke before we went on the air here, we were both, you and I were both sort of saying it's kind of scary times, and I do feel that way much of the time as an astrologer, just by looking at what I know of astrology and what I could see and vision happening. But I'm a very much of a perhaps naively optimistic person. I do think that, and that just may be through hardship. We've both endured hardship in our lives. When you endure hardship and it's over and done, you can look back at that hardship and say, wow, thank God that happened to me in some ways, because I wouldn't be the person I am today had I not had that hardship. It's sort of like the squares. We got to climb the stairs. With the squares, those 90-degree angles are forcing us to make decisions that may be difficult. But when we're done and we climb those stairs and we look back at those down the stairs of the stairs we climbed, we say, wow, those were difficult squares getting up the stairs, but I'm here where I am now. And the reward does come, I believe.
What you're saying is absolutely right. It's the liminal space between departure and arrival.
Yeah, I like
that. And that liminality is very Neptunian.
Mm-hmm.
On my website, I have an article on on Into the Mystic, I call it, which is about Neptune, and it talks about Captain Nemo.
Oh yeah.
20,000
Leagues Under the Sea. Yeah.
That means nobody in Latin, and then there's Odysseus, whose name is Odys, which means nobody in Greek, and so there's all this nobody that when you're in between lives, like just
in the Bardo.
A couple of months ago, I was in a certain place, and in a couple of months, oh God, I have no idea where I'm going to be. But it's the liminal part that makes everybody so scared and anxious, and they want to just disappear. And
right. And so I know an old image that comes to mind when I think about that, and it's a great image. It's sort of like driving your car at night in long, flat spaces. Like you're driving across New Mexico, long, flat state, and it's at night. And you can only see as far ahead as your headlights, but you keep going.
In Africa.
There you go.
On the veldt, and then you suddenly see black people walking on the side. It's like, oh my God, I could have run over them. And, it's so interesting, that kind of liminal space.
Yeah, and you can only see as far as your headlights go. But you keep going because the headlights keep providing more light as you go. So I think that's what we can take away as sort of a salve for these troubled times we live in.
Good metaphor. Very good metaphor.
I think so too. Yeah, it's and I think that the Uranus let's just touch briefly on the Uranus in Taurus. I mean, I think it can, of course, we know astrology is a dualistic study, and it can go either way. I do believe that we'll see great changes within the environment that will come to us either by virtue of nature or by virtue of man-made. But I think that for the next 7 years, starting on March 6th, when Uranus works its way into Taurus, but we're going to get a bang from Mars there for a day or two, when Mars actually conjuncts Uranus at, I think, 28 or 29 degrees, which is actually the square to the natal Pluto of the United States. So, and that's happening over the next few weeks. And over the next few weeks, we've got Michael Cohen going in to speak. We've got, who knows what will happen? Who knows what will come to fruition at this point? So it could be interesting. I see your cat there. She wants to get in on the conversation.
Possible, this cat.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think that's a very healthy thing to have, and I have one myself.
She's fed up with us talking, is what it is.
Well, that's good. That's okay. That's fine. I'm glad to see her. Nice to see you. But I do think that I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think it's going to be a reordering of the financial institutions, because it is sort of the second house? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the financial institution, as we call it, which is a very weird combination of ideas. The financial institution is going to undergo quite a shift, and part of it will be this stuff that's invisible, because what we like is we like tangible money. We want dollars in our hand, or or pesos or whatever. But the invisible money, like the Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be some problems with this Uranus and Uranus.
Oh, I think so. It's already collapsed, I think. I mean,
well, I think that what happened is the owner of the Bitcoin died, and they have access to where it is.
And they can't. He had the password. He died with the password, and no one knows.
So, which to me is just like, oh my God, because I don't believe in any of those things.
I don't either. No, I want cash.
I'm old-fashioned. Yeah, I want money in my pocket and some in the bank, and some coming in through PayPal.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think that we're going to see the end of this whole invisible money thing. I really do. I think it's going to run its course.
It's going to have to come to another, because you still need to deal with the hand-to-hand cash transaction. We can't all walk around with an ATM in our back pocket.
No, and as a global community, all the world, there's very few of the people in the world who would actually be able to do that. Right.
And we can't trade any other way. So I think that you're right. That's going to come. I also see it as, I think Uranus and Taurus will also bring about major revelations of the environment, as we mentioned earlier, perhaps more earthquakes, I hate to say it, tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, superstorms. All those things are likely due to the nature of what we've created as a violator of the planet in some ways.
Interesting enough, mythologically, it's Neptune, Poseidon, who is the creator of the tsunami, because he hits the earth with his prong and creates an earthquake, which then produces a tsunami. Right. Yeah, so there's a Neptunian thing in there as well.
Well, there'll be a Neptune. Eventually, there'll be a Neptune-Uranus sextile, and it may come about.
Yeah, because it's in its own side. Yes, that article, you must read it, because you'd love it.
I will read it. I certainly will. We have had an interesting conversation here. We're out of time, but I do want to thank you, Erin, for coming on. It's always great fun to talk with you. My guest today has been Erin Sullivan. Her website is erinsullivan.com, ERINSULLIVAN. I encourage you to go there. Seek out her books. Seek out her books, because her books are where you're going to find the greatest wisdom, and you can reread them over and over again, and you'll get great comfort from them, I think, especially given the times that we live in. all cycles come and go. This is the great nature of life. Time is a corkscrew, and so we're going to go around and around, but we're going to go down the road further each time. And as we go around and around, we have themes that recur. Yes, we are entering into an 84-year cycle where, yes, the Great Depression did occur. We got through that. Great things came as a result of that. We had the New Deal was a result of that with Roosevelt. The young Democrats in the House nowadays are talking about a Green New Deal. That may not be a small coincidence that they're returning to that, because the environment is going to hold us hostage at some point in time. So I encourage you to reach out to Erin, book a reading with her, spend some time talking with her, tap into the wellspring of knowledge that she has, and use it for your own. ErinSullivan.com. Her books are on Amazon, but I encourage you to get them from her site. It's just the same thing. And reach out for her classes. She teaches at Kepler University and is widely regarded around the world as a great astrologer. Do you have any events coming up that people can be notified of?
I'm working on some classes that I'll be teaching up in the northeast of the United States with a woman who wants me to come up 3 times a year.
Oh, great. That'd be good.
And in August, I was in France teaching my personal heroic journey with all Europeans and South Americans. It was fascinating.
Good.
So I have some work coming up that takes me out of my space, which I like.
Of course. And then you're not isolated that way. And also, you're going to start working on that book about Neptune, aren't you, and the Great Tribe?
There you go. Okay. Wisconsin, get me a grant, and I'll
all right. I'll see what we can do. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Erin.
My pleasure, Chris.
Very good.
And thanks for your good.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.